What's going on, everybody, and welcome back into the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel, where today we're going to go through Week 6 trade for candidates at the wide receiver position. Players who maybe have recently underperformed that we believe you might be able to buy low in your fantasy leagues as a result. There are certain players who you just know what to expect from them year in and year out, and sometimes those guys are going to have bad games. And as savvy fantasy players, we want to try to take advantage of the panic that our fellow league mates might experience as a result of those down weeks. It's not always going to work. A lot of times your league mates are going to be aware of the ebbs and flows, but I'm telling you time and time again, there will be moments throughout a season where you can take advantage of a potential panic mode by somebody else in your league. So that's the name of the game with these videos. Make sure you hit subscribe on this channel, like on this video, and drop your comment below if you enjoy this type of fantasy football content. We're going to start at the top of the list. As we talk about some potential buy low candidates today, we'll also perhaps get into some guys who maybe you want to sell high. To buy low, you've obviously got to sell somebody. So we'll try and match up some of those names, and we'll also look at the wide receiver position at some of the most traded players over the course of this week and see what we think about some of the deals that are actually taking place in real fantasy leagues. What you see on your screen here is a list of the Week 5 performers at the wide receiver position, sorted by fantasy points. So we're going to start at the top of the list and go through anything that we see as notable on our way down. So let's go ahead and get started here as we look at Ja'Marr Chase. Yeah, he certainly bounced back in a major way, as did Joe Burrow. So if there was ever a window to buy low on Ja'Marr Chase, it has officially closed because he looked back. 52 fantasy points, I believe, is a season high for anybody at the wide receiver or maybe even at the running back position. I think he cleared the number in PPR by Devonta from a couple of weeks ago. DJ Moore also putting together a 3-touchdown week with 49 fantasy points back on Thursday night. So if there was a buy low window on him, that's closed up for the time being as well. Tyreek Hill back to his old ways with 32 fantasy points. Last week, he was a subject of our videos as a potential buy low, and I did put buy low in the title of the video, and if you would accuse that of being a bit clickbaity, I would understand. Because really, in a week where Tyreek Hill doesn't do much, it's not the notion of being able to buy him low. It's the idea that you could buy him at all, because most weeks it's just impossible to trade for Tyreek Hill. You can offer pretty much an entire squad worth of players, and the person with Tyreek is likely to just say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And rightfully so, because he is a unique difference maker in fantasy football. But last week when he scored 10 points or whatever it was, I know there were some trades that went down in leagues. It's rare. Most of the time, the person that has a guy like Tyreek Hill is not going to budge, but it's always worth checking in, and that's why we do these videos. You want to cover all your bases and see what's possible. So, yeah, you're not buying Tyreek Hill after a week like that, but how about Adam Thielen? I made the comment last week that based on the way he has performed, I just think it's going to continue to happen for him. You look at his fantasy production this year, clearly he is a favored target there in Carolina. And I have made the speculation that you're going to more easily be able to buy Adam Thielen even off of these high games than any other wide receiver, because people will look at his age, they will look at his offense that he's in and know that he's, it's just not a very robust offense. But I think he will consistently continue to be a force for fantasy, especially in PPR leagues. You cannot argue at all with the target volume that he is getting right now. As I take a look at my settings and realize that I want you guys to be able to see the targets on screen when I pull up a player profile. So quick edit there. We're back in business. 14, 8, and 13 targets over the past 3 weeks. Add in week 2 where he received 9 targets, and you're just going to have a hard time finding anybody in the NFL that can do that consistently week in and week out. Is there going to be a ton of touchdown upside? You'd think not. But he's got 3 touchdowns on the season as well. Adam Thielen, I think you got to start treating him like a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. I don't think that's reactionary. I think that you're looking for the first time that he has a down week, if he should happen to have one, and then you want to swoop in and try and trade for him. I think you can try and make the buy high move now on him, because if you trade a big name, a guy like Jalen Waddle, like, could you pull off a Waddle for Thielen trade? I think so, just based on the upside of a Dolphins offense, but he's the number 2 in Miami, whereas Adam Thielen is the bona fide number 1 in Carolina. I think I would trade Jalen Waddle for Adam Thielen. Now, I say that. Will I actually offer that deal in my league where I have Waddle? Not entirely sure that I will, but man, Thielen's a guy that I wish I had some pieces of, and I ignored him in drafts. I bought into the idea that he was kind of cooked and nearing the end of his career based on the decline that he had in efficiency last year in Minnesota. Carolina, man, they don't have a great thing going offensively necessarily. They don't have any wins. They're struggling. But I think it was actually a decent enough signing to go get Adam Thielen because he has been productive for them, and I just think that's going to continue. The rapport there with whoever's been at quarterback, whether it's been, Andy Dalton or Bryce Young, has been really solid from Thielen, a player that I really have loved throughout his career. But, I don't have any shares of him, and maybe that was my fault coming into draft season. But like I said, maybe it's a little bit too much to say I'd offer Waddle for him, but think about some of the names that feel like snazzier, sexier names in fantasy, and then realize, man, they're not going to match the target volume of Adam Thielen, so it might be worth it to make that swap if the person that has him is thinking that Adam Thielen is a little bit of fool's gold. They might believe in him, and so you may be barking up the wrong tree. But again, it never hurts to ask. Now, behind Thielen here in the Week 5 wide receiver rankings based on their performance, you can still see here in the middle column, I've adjusted the screen a bit, but you can still see the fantasy points from Week 5. George Pickens had a big game, the audible, right, from Kenny Pickett on the game-winning touchdown, made a big deal for the Steelers and made a big deal for George Pickens in his fantasy day. Pittsburgh, I believe, let's take a look here, is on bye this week. Yeah, so maybe if there's a team that has George Pickens, their season hasn't gone well, and you feel like he's just a stud athlete, go ahead and trade for him now. Bye weeks are often a great time to go and target a player, especially if the team that has that player is struggling and probably doesn't want to be patient. But I would say that George Pickens, with a big game that he just had, maybe not an ideal time to buy him. Stephon Diggs doing Stephon Diggs things. We know what he's capable of. Gabe Davis with a nice week. We'll go down the list a little further to DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley. Like, these are stud wide receivers that you expect to be pretty much stud wide receivers. If I gloss over a name and you want to hear more insight about that player, just throw them in the comments below on YouTube, and I'll make sure to give you kind of a more well-rounded answer. I just want to try to get through some of the names that are more nondescript and not targets for us this week. I want to get through them quickly so that we have time to dive into the guys that I really think we should be paying attention to. Jacoby Myers is interesting, man. I think it was more a product of the scheme, the defensive scheme of the Packers in that game. You could just tell that Jimmy Garoppolo was never looking in the direction of Devonta Adams for the majority of this game. He was looking at Jacoby Myers over the middle. It was just the way I think that the Packers schemed them up defensively. Jair Alexander had a good game on Adams, but it was like, again, Jimmy G wasn't even looking the direction of his wide receiver one. So I'm not going to overreact to this game from Jacoby Myers, but again, I think Jimmy G is the type of quarterback who could just kind of zone in on one target. And if he decides that Jacoby Myers is that guy, as he's done in several games this season, right? 3 of the 5 games, it's been double-digit targets for Jacoby Myers. So he's not quite to the Adam Thielen territory of, hey, he's a target monster and we should just consider him among the elite wide receivers for fantasy this year in PPR. He's not quite to that level because you do have Adams who's going to have his games more often than not. And that's just not the case for anybody in Carolina alongside Thielen. But I do think Jacoby Myers is interesting. He's probably an example of a guy that if you have him, you're happy to go ahead and keep him. But I do think there's a world in which you could potentially trade up from him as well. And you might be able to trade a Jacoby Myers for one of the buy low names that we're talking about, especially if you end up packaging another decent flex type or bench type piece with some upside along with Myers. Keep Myers in mind as a name to potentially send away for a big fish who underperformed this week, because those are the types of sell high, buy lows that we're looking to make happen in our fantasy leagues. Puka Nacua, the demise was a little bit premature if you projected that for the rookie wide receiver in Los Angeles. Cooper Kupp returned, but you look at those two, they were right neck and neck in terms of fantasy production this week. I think that's going to continue. I think they are both going to have nice target volume. The touchdowns are probably going to alternate between the two of them, but it was clear that Cooper Kupp looks spicy, looks back, looks ready to go. And so if you manage to buy low on him, as I think I did, you can see he's on my roster here in this league. Congratulations. If you kept Puka Nacua or bought him off the promise that he might be worse when Cooper Kupp returns, I think it's okay to take a little bit of a victory lap there. I think they are both going to be, when healthy, prominent fantasy players the rest of the season. We got A.J. Brown. Curtis Samuel definitely played over his head. I've got him in a league. I'm not sure how much trade value he actually has, but if he's playing that sort of Deebo Samuel light role, we say light just because he's probably not as talented as Deebo, but it's the same kind of role that we've seen Deebo have with the 49ers in some recent seasons, and that can be productive for fantasy. So I honestly think there's a world in which you could see yourself trading for Curtis Samuel, but I'm not really willing to give up a ton for him because the volume could go Terry McLaurin's way. It could go the way of Jahan Dotson at times in Washington. So not too crazy about that, but Curtis could be a sell high. Like, again, could you pair Jacoby Myers and Curtis Samuel for a better wide receiver than Jacoby Myers? I think you could in certain worlds. It just depends on what the needs of your league mate actually are. Let's take a look at Jordan Addison, who had a big week as Justin Jefferson left the game with an injury. 6 for 64 and a touchdown on 9 targets. He was limited on Wednesday due to an ankle injury. I'm going to assume that unless that injury took place in practice on Wednesday, I'm thinking he'll probably be suiting up for Sunday's game against the Bears, and he'd be a smash play in that one. So I think there's a world in which you trade for Jordan Addison now before people really fully understand the degree to which he's going to be involved in that offense. It'll be difficult because if you look at his numbers as a rookie, he's gone 16, 16, 11, 0, and then 18 fantasy points. So he's got the one outlier game that maybe you can sell an opponent on and say, hey, he's risky, he's volatile. I don't think he's going to be. He's not going to score a touchdown in every game. He's scored a touchdown now in, 3 of 5 games, and it's not going to be that consistent all year long for him. But the targets and the yardage have been solid each and every game, other than the one where he was just completely off the map for whatever reason against Carolina. Just got the one target, didn't catch a ball in that game. But they're not going to have any other choice but to go to him without Justin Jefferson out there. So for me, Jordan Addison is you called it buy high because he had a good game, but I think he's got the potential for the next month or so when Jefferson is out to be even better. Like, easy call for me. Jacoby Myers or Addison. I'm taking Addison. Myers plus Samuel or Addison. I would trade for Addison. Maybe tough to do, but that's just the first example that we're kind of tossing out there. I'd like to mark down some names of guys that I would like to, before the end of the video, kind of just take a look at the recent trades that have been made with those players and let you know whether I would be on one side or the other of those deals. So give me one moment here as I decide to, and I could have paused the video for this, apologize, but I just want to mark down Addison's name because I don't want to forget it before the end of the video. Okay, moving along to Josh Reynolds, who, by the way, I think is, I don't know if you're trading for him. He's only owned in 41% of leagues, so go pick him up if he's out there. Most competitive leagues, I think Reynolds is going to be rostered, but he's got the trust of Jared Goff more than a Jameson Williams, even if he's more talented. Amon-Ra St. Brown has not been fully healthy, so Reynolds, I think, is an interesting piece. If he's out there somehow in your leagues, he shouldn't be. Pick him up off of waivers. I don't even care if it's a shallow league at this point. He's been pretty productive. Marquise Brown looks like he suffered a bit of an injury, but has just continued to churn out solid fantasy days. I mean, it's not sexy, but you're not going to argue with 17, 17, 16, 16 fantasy points. The targets are great. He's a talented player. Missed Wednesday with an illness, so that's nothing. Another guy like Adam Thielen that just for whatever reason, the name might not be all too attractive to you. But for me, unless I've got Hollywood Brown and I'm packaging him with a Jacoby Myers to get a superstar that had a bad week, like I know that CeeDee Lamb is going to be on this list a little bit lower because he didn't do much for the Cowboys. It's been recently kind of a trying time for that offense. I would still probably rather have CeeDee Lamb, and so maybe I'm trading up to a superstar like that. But otherwise, I could see a world in which you just accept Hollywood Brown as your wide receiver 3 maybe, or your flex, depending on your roster construction, and just enjoy those PPR points. He has been really consistent. There's going to be a week where Hollywood struggles. I would probably wait until after that week to just trade for him on the cheap because people are not going to necessarily be like too protective of him, I don't think. He feels like that just kind of guy that's easy to discard based on being in a bad offense. But take advantage of that. Like, fantasy points are really all that matter at the end of the day. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be, the wide receiver one that gets the most highlights on SportsCenter or whatever, or on TikTok. Fantasy points, man, that's what matters. So I'm looking at Marquise Brown and Adam Thielen as well as guys that are probably underappreciated for what they've done so far and may continue to do for fantasy teams. I did a Week 6 waiver video that came out on Tuesday afternoon, and Josh Downs was in that video as basically my number one waiver pickup of the week. And it looks like he's still listed as only being in 9% of rostered. I just don't think that's possibly right anymore. But you should be picking up Josh Downs. I think there's a world in which he picks up more target volume than he's even getting, and he's been very efficient with the targets that he's gotten. 6 for 97 on 6 targets this past week. Doesn't even bother me that you see the injury to Anthony Richardson, because I think that he can definitely continue to establish himself with Gardner Minshew. Had a couple of big catches from Minshew in the last game. So not necessarily a trade target, but somebody that you still could be able to pick up. And I don't know, there are probably some bench wide receivers that I would certainly trade for Josh Downs with. So just something to keep in mind there. Drake London, man, couple of nice double-digit performances in a row. He's still a sell for me. He will be every week, and I'll go down with the ship. He might go 14 points every week the rest of the fantasy season, and I'll still be trying to sell him because I just don't want to trust that target volume or the passing offense in Atlanta. If the quarterback situation changes, if the coaching situation changes, I'll be all ears. Until then, you're just not, and this isn't to say you guys have to do what I do, right? But that's just not a guy that I want on my team because he's so talented and it will frustrate you, just like if you've had Kyle Pitts the last couple of seasons. Here's Jalen Waddle. Yeah, it's not been super strong of a start for him. Remember, he didn't play week 3, so don't pay attention to the 0 there. Other than that, though, like he's been double digits every week but one. The touchdowns haven't really come his way. This past week, it did, and so he had his best performance for PPR of the season and had 10 targets. The efficiency is going to improve. There's no doubt that Jalen Waddle is a great player. I don't know if you trade for a guy and call it a buy low after a 14.5-point game, but I still think the best is yet to come from Waddle. So, yeah, I'm still considering him a guy that you could buy more cheaply than because, again, there could be people that look at that and say 35 yards, I gotta sell now on Waddle because he may never score a touchdown again. I don't know how many people are thinking that, but if there's anybody out there that is, I think you take advantage of him because to me, he's still like a top, I don't know if it's 15, 18 wide receiver the rest of the season, maybe even higher than that. So I'm not panicking by any means on Jalen Waddle. Christian Kirk has been solid. Irwin's not really a pickup for me, but he'll be like, in that Tyler Boyd range where he'll have his games every once in a while. Rashee Rice is kind of interesting. He has a good game because he scores a touchdown, only 33 yards. I would wait till a game where he doesn't score a touchdown, but also, he's going to get more involved in KC. Talked about this on my radio show that I do in Columbia, Missouri today, where we talk a lot of Chiefs, and I look at Rashee Rice as maybe the only guy who could potentially emerge from the Kansas City wide receiver core to be a legit number 2 and a complement to Travis Kelce. I don't think Sky Moore is going to be that guy. Kadarius Toney, they don't seem to want to play him enough. I think they're trying to manage his snaps so he doesn't get hurt because he's always injured. So I never know if he's going to be able to develop into that true wide receiver 1 alongside the top tight end that Kansas City has. And Justin Ross with Justin Watson, we don't see Richie James on the field. MVS, we kind of know what he is at this point. Rashee Rice, the second-round rookie, is the one guy with a chance. So if you're banking on somebody turning into that other guy to go to for Patrick Mahomes besides Kelce, Rashee Rice could become that guy if he continues to get more snaps. He's played pretty well. Kind of shaking off the rust of a rookie, and you know that it's going to be a development period. But I think by the end of the season, it wouldn't shock me to see Rashee Rice end up in a prominent spot. I don't know what he would cost you right now. Maybe that's another guy that I'll mark down and try to make mention of as we go through the recent trades on Yahoo at the end of the episode. But just wanted to make mention of him. Going to kind of gloss over DJ Chark, not too enthused by him. Zay Flowers, 11 targets, but only 5 receptions. He's going to continue to get peppered. He had a couple of bad drops in this game, one that was just brutal. He's a rookie. He's getting target volume. I think he does have talent. I would probably still be buying him because I think he's rarely going to give you less than 8 or 10 fantasy points, and there is always the potential that he figures it out and can come up with quite a few more fantasy points. So he didn't have a bad week for fantasy to where you're like buying low on the fantasy total, but I do think it's possible still to get him for a decent price. Christian Watson, not efficient, but had the one big bomb from Jordan Love. I think we look at Watson as the best is still yet to come. When he can combine the 91 yards with a touchdown, and if not for the horse collar tackle on him this week, his fantasy points would say 18 instead of 11, right? Remember, that was a great play. I can't recall if it was Marcus Peters or who exactly it was, but drug him down at basically the 5-yard line by the horse collar, took the penalty, and it ended up saving the Raiders a touchdown. But what it did was change the outlook on Christian Watson. So if you can be smart enough to look beyond the box score and say that's why his fantasy total wasn't higher this week, I would argue that Christian Watson is a great guy to buy now because he is on bye. And so you might have a few people that just view him as like a flex because, okay, he's got 10 points, 11 points. I think we have seen the talent of Christian Watson, and people that are paying attention know he's better than just a flex for your roster when he's fully healthy and active. So I feel like after the bye, they're really probably going to unleash Christian Watson. Jordan Love targeted the crap out of him. He wasn't very efficient on his throws in that Monday night game. So for me, he's in the buy category, but let me know in the comments. Like, if you want to know, okay, you keep saying buy, who would you actually sell? Would you sell so-and-so to get Christian Watson? Ask me those questions, because that way I'll be able to cover specific to your league situation and let you know what I would actually do, rather than just try to throw out as many hypotheticals as I can and have a video that lasts 2 hours. Nobody really wants to listen to that. So let me know in the comments. That's going to be a huge part of taking advantage of what we do on this channel, because I do reply to all the comments. So let me know what you think, and please do subscribe. Trying to build this channel up from scratch has been a lot of fun, but I cannot do it without your help. So if you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. Let's see here. Zay Jones, just kind of doing Zay Jones stuff. Jerry Jeudy is interesting because maybe he gets traded to a better situation, and I think he'll be in that kind of 8 to 12 to 15 to maybe 18 to 20 range when he scores touchdowns, regardless of if he gets traded or not. So he's a soft buy for me. I would prefer Christian Watson over Jeudy right now, but I think they're kind of in a similar tier. I did gloss over Debo, who I want him to be a buy because he had a 0 game and an 11 game. But you do got to recognize that McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, they're all very talented, and they're all going to take volume away from him in any given week. But like Debo in 4 of 5 games has gone double digits. He's cleared 20 twice. He's pretty darn safe, guys. I know he had the one bad game, but I think that was more based on the injury that he was kind of nursing, and they didn't want to have to use him if they didn't need to. They destroyed Arizona, so he basically got a bye week where he was technically active, but just didn't get targeted, because once they blew out Arizona, it was like, okay, we're going to rest Debo. I think when he plays and is fully healthy and active, he's going to continue to be a smash. So probably a buy. Like, I think Adam Thielen or Deebo Samuel, I probably still even lean Debo. That's a way where I would say maybe you do trade Thielen high. It's a toss-up. If Thielen outscored him the rest of the year, both fully healthy, it still wouldn't surprise me. But I think Debo's upside is ridiculous. Like, you can have these games where he gets 12 targets, and imagine if he was efficient and caught more than half of them. He's going to score. He's a guy that can score multiple touchdowns in a given game. Even with all those other weapons in San Francisco, I'm still like kind of eager to find a way to get Debo on some more of my teams if he doesn't. Again, 11 points, 0 points the last 2 weeks. There are going to be people who go, he's a wide receiver 3, whatever. I don't think he is. I think he's top 20 pretty handily and is a guy that you could trade for. Let me know again if you've got names that you want to ask about. Throw them out there. Rondale Moore is interesting. He's not even owned in my league. I would like to pick him up, but my bench is, I got to make a 2-for-1 happen. Otherwise, there's no room because I have a guy that has to come off of IR. But Rondale Moore potentially could get more runs. Look at what he did in this last game when James Conner got injured. 3 carries for 50 yards. He's explosive. Week 3 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. Wouldn't surprise me to see him in that 5 carry range, 3 to 5 carries, maybe more every week to go along with 5 or 6 targets. If that ends up being the case for Rondale Moore, he's going to be a guy that you're fine to flex, even in like a 12 or a 14 team league. So I'm probably picking up Rondale Moore if he's out there. Not to start him this week unless I'm desperate with bye weeks, but just to kind of stash away somebody that I think we should make mention of. Michael Thomas doesn't really enthuse me. He'll get his double-digit games, but nothing crazy. Michael Pittman could be a soft buy because I think he's going to continue to get tons of targets. But don't forget, Josh Downs is a factor here. But it's just been really solid across the board from Pittman outside of one rough week in week 4. So a soft buy. Now we're starting to get into the guys, though, where you say, hey, aggressively pursue. Like, go get Brenden Ayuk, man. He had 9 points this week. I think he's going to have more weeks of 20 than he does below 10. So that's just my view. I think he's a talented player who's finally emerging. He's somebody to circle on your board. I would prefer Ayuk, I think, to Watson and Jerry Jeudy both, but Watson is kind of a toss-up there because he won't have to share the volume quite as much as Ayuk will on their respective teams. Turpin, I think he got injured anyway. Cedric Wilson, no thank you. Brandon Powell, a little bit interesting to pick up because of the Jefferson injury, but not going anywhere near starting him. A toe issue for Olave. Keep in mind, he's been a disappointment, but if he's getting back to a fully healthy Derek Carr at some point with this kind of target volume, 10, 11, 11, he's going to be a smash. He's a very talented player. You may have to kind of grit through some ugly weeks here if he's kind of banged up, but I think by the time you get to the end of the year, past the bye especially, you're going to want Olave on your team. And I think with where he's been the last couple of weeks, 1 point, 9 point, you could probably trade for him and end up having him as your wide receiver 3 or maybe even your flex in 12 to 14 team leagues if you play your cards right. So he's a big time buy for me this week, but just recognize that it might get worse before it gets better. But I don't want to risk it suddenly isn't getting worse and he has the smash game and he wasn't on my roster when it happened. So if you've got the chops to maybe trade for Olave, Like, would I trade Jacoby Myers and Curtis Samuel, that former example, for Olave? It's a perfect example. And it might be able to get done because people see those guys putting up 40 combined, and Olave's got 10 over the last 2 weeks. People can be reactionary. Same comment for CeeDee Lamb. I know that stupid Jerry Jones said, hey, don't you want to get CeeDee the ball more? And he said, no, I want to see us throw it to the tight ends. He's a doofus, but he also doesn't coach the team. I think eventually CeeDee is going to get more opportunities than he's been seeing. He's too good not to. So I'm still buying on CeeDee Lamb, similarly to all the other names that we've said. I'm trading those guys for CeeDee. And also, I want to make sure to make note of Olave and Lamb as well for toward the end of the video. I want to kind of get into some of those guys and see what you might be able to get for them. Or I should say, what you might have to give up to get them. Devonta Adams had a bad week, but we talked about that with Jacoby Myers. I don't think that's going to be the case every week. So this is going to be a rare chance to buy Devonta Adams, and he was a DNP on Wednesday. Usually that doesn't bother me for a veteran. He's had the shoulder injury for a while now. It's probably just a veteran rest day for the most part. I would be buying Devonta Adams off of the, I guess you could say, bad week where he basically only got targets on one drive in the game. It was rough. Garrett Wilson is going to have these types of weeks. This is kind of about what he's going to be. Between 8 and 15, 16, if he scores touchdowns, he might be able to get even higher than that. He could be a buy for me this week, but I'm not giving up. Like, I'm looking to trade 2 bench guys for him. Like Jacoby Myers or Garrett Wilson, I probably lean Garrett Wilson, but I think you can swing bigger if you have a guy like Myers off the week that he just had. Love Garrett Wilson, love the talent. I just don't love the situation. He could explode at any given time, but the consistency is going to be lacking. Keep in mind, he's got the bye week coming up, so maybe you take a gamble that he struggles against Philly, and that's not an unreasonable gamble to make. And then maybe if you really want to get the guy, you trade for him going into week 7 where he's on bye. Tank Dell, a little bit banged up, probably not playing this week with a concussion. You might be able to trade for him really cheap after he gets ruled out, especially if the league doesn't have IR spot. And I think Tank Dell is going to be still like a top 30 wide receiver the rest of the way, maybe top 25. I view him in that wide receiver, like back-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range in deeper 14-team leagues and 12-team leagues. Maybe he's more of a flex, but I really do think he's got a good connection with C.J. Stroud. So I'm looking at Tank Dell still as we go forward. All right, we're on to the bottom page here. I think it's the bottom page. We'll look below this briefly just in case we were missing anybody who really struggled. But let's see if there's anybody that stands out. Nico Collins could be a soft buy because he's had these explosive weeks but has had a couple of duds as well. Always want to trade for a guy off of a dud rather than an explosive week. You're just going to get a better price. Jahan Dotson, meh. It's starting to have to give up on him a little bit. But, the situation is what it is for him at this point in Washington. Let's talk about Justin Jefferson because he's out on IR, so that means he's gone for at least 4 weeks. The injury could, of course, be longer than that. He's a week 13 bye, which is a little bit awkward if you go out 4 weeks, 6, 7, 8, 9. So then there'd be 3 games between the bye where he could conceivably legally come back. But we don't really know how much time he's going to miss. Kevin O'Connell said he doesn't believe that it's the hammy is a season-ending injury. However, it's a weird one. I was told by on our radio show, we talked to Will Carroll, the injury expert is what he goes by at injury expert on Twitter. He talked about the hammy being a little bit more severe and a little bit up toward like the rear end, kind of back. It's just kind of an awkward spot for a guy who needs the explosiveness of Jefferson. Could be tough to recover from this one, and the Vikings are going the wrong way fast. So are they going to trade Kirk Cousins? Jefferson doesn't have a contract. Is he going to risk it in the latter portion of the season for a team going nowhere? Like, this is definitely a weird spot. In redraft, I would be trading Jefferson away for the right price, and I'll put down Jefferson to make sure I talk about him at the end of this video. We've got 6 names right now that we're going to look at. I'll try to keep it to that so it can go rather quickly. But interesting. We're going to look at some Jefferson trades to decide because he may be done for the season. It may be one of those things like Joe Mixon last year where every week you hope, oh, he's coming back, and it takes forever to actually get him back. You could get something for Justin Jefferson if you're a team that's like 2-3 and you can't afford it to wait on Jefferson, who may never return. Like, I think there's a trade to be made there. So we'll kind of see if any deals are getting done on Yahoo and talk about him. Nobody else on this page is notable. Drop Sky Moore. Man, I'm mad at Sky Moore. Let's look at the next page to see if anybody stands out. Michael Wilson, huge disappointment. I think it's going to lean Rondale Moore's way more than Michael Wilson in Arizona. Cortland Sutton, you could try and buy him. Bad game, but could get traded. And this was his first bad game of the year. So buy Cortland Sutton if you can get him for the price of somebody who just had a 2-point game. I don't know exactly who that would be, but let me know if you have questions on Sutton. Jameson Williams, kind of same thing, but I think Sutton's definitely, I'd rather have Sutton than Jameson Williams. I want Jameson Williams to be a thing. He may end up being a stud, but we have not seen it yet. And the Lions, man, they don't seem to mind not using their highly drafted offensive skill players because Jahmyr Gibbs is not going to be the workhorse in Detroit as much as I would like for him to be. So is Jameson Williams just going to play second fiddle to Josh Reynolds all year? He might. He absolutely might. Devonta Smith, bad game, but that makes him a great buy. He might be the headliner of the video. I'm going to mark down as Smith to be the seventh guy that we look at. 17, 23, 8, 14. We know his talent. We know that he's better than what he did this past week. Got 5 targets, caught 1 ball. Just a weird game script for him. Smith is a humongous buy. Anytime somebody has a true dud like that, it's not hard to imagine their fantasy managers just being fed up. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about the idea that you could buy him. If anybody else had a 0.00 game that is notable, we're going to miss him here because these are all dudes. I mean, this guy's name is literally Pimpleton. So I don't think there's anybody that Quentin Johnston, I guess, but he was on bye, so it doesn't really count. Anybody that was on bye, you're probably not going to be able to buy him at this point. So that is what it is. All right. Let's go ahead. And I think we're looking for the trade market tab here on Yahoo to be able to search for some of these guys. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to look at the most transaction trends. I keep clicking the wrong dang thing. No, Yahoo, I'm not signing up, but I am giving you some free pub on this channel. All right, lots of trades being made. Let's take a look at least wide receivers that are being traded the most here on Yahoo this week. Interesting to see Puka Nakua's name at the top of this list at the wide receiver position. Jalen Waddle, when we mentioned Devonta Smith, we mentioned Olave. Did we mention Debo? I don't think we did. We weren't going to look at him. But some of these other guys we're definitely taking a close look at as it is. So Puka is the other one that I want to kind of look into, and Waddle. So that's going to give us a good number of names now as we go to the trade market and take a look at what deals are actually getting done for these players in Yahoo leagues and how can we maybe learn something from those deals to know what to offer in our leagues. No idea why Puka is being dealt for Aaron Jones. Definitely prefer the Puka side on that one. Puka and Waddle for Amon-Ra, man. That's a Puka Waddle side for me. I think you're selling low on Waddle. Amon-Ra is the best player in the deal if healthy, but right now he's not healthy. And Puka and Waddle, I think, are just 2 studs. So I guess the team making that deal has great wide receiver depth because they're just seeing it as a minor upgrade. But I prefer the value on the Puka Waddle side. And this is the part of the show where you type it on YouTube. Type in the comments and let me know what kind of trades are you thinking of making? What do you want to know? Who should you be trading for? Like, whatever your question is, drop it in and we'll answer it. Here we've got a Puka in Pollard for Bijan and Kirk. That's a pretty fair trade because Bijan's an upgrade, you would think, over those guys. But I think the value is on the Puka Pollard side there, actually. Usually I'm a fan of getting the best player in the deal, and here I think that's Bijan. But I think the downgrade to Kirk from Puka at wide receiver is notable enough to where I think I prefer the Puka Nacua and Pollard side. Looking for some 1-for-1s here, some 2-for-1s. Olave and Gibson for Puka is interesting. Gibson's a nothing factor for me in this, so would you rather have Olave or Puka? I think it's just kind of personal preference at that point, but Puka has been more consistent. Waddle may be the one toward the end of the season that gains more steam, though, because he doesn't have to share with Cooper Kupp, but I'm still very into Puka Nacua. Puka and Justin Jefferson for Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle. My mind is exploding at this trade. Don't know if that's dynasty. We're going to assume these are redraft. And if so, Chase and Waddle for sure, because Jefferson is out for 6 weeks. That's an example of the types of deals that you should be trying to make beyond any shadow of a doubt. Puka and Derrick Henry for McCaffrey is a great example of trading 2-for-1 to upgrade at a position. It's almost impossible to trade for McCaffrey, but he had like 13 points this week. And so I did mention earlier today, recording the RB trade target video, hey, go for McCaffrey if you can try. This may be your only chance to ever do it, and I'll be damned if somebody didn't make a trade for McCaffrey. I just real quick want to look at like what trades are legitimately being made for Christian McCaffrey in fantasy. You wouldn't think there'd be too many, and you look at most of them are these like monster deals where people are trying to obscure the value and bring shadow to a doubt of whether or not the person giving up McCaffrey is doing the right thing. Of course, the answer to that is no. Like here, McCaffrey and Higgins for Kamara, Kittle, Moss. Moss is nothing. I know that he's not nothing right now, but in terms of trades, I'm always going to throw him in if I'm getting a Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey over Kamara, Higgins versus Kittle is whatever. You're getting Christian McCaffrey. That's the side that wins almost every time. Here's a 2-for-1 of Bijan and Zay Flowers for McCaffrey. Great example of a deal that doesn't get done if McCaffrey didn't just go for 40, right? If he goes for 40, you can't get this deal done. He went for 13, and so you can occasionally get this deal done. I'm surprised to see it, but that should be living proof that it makes sense to ask. Even if your league mate clowns you, you don't care about that. You care about winning fantasy football leagues. So get clowned in the short term. In the long term, just know that the process that you're running is sound if you're making these trade offers, because even if the person that you're sending it to doesn't, cave to that offer, that doesn't mean the next person won't. So I'm a volume trader, man. And yeah, people in my league clown me for it sometimes, but I don't have any regrets about it because I do think I'm offering trades that conceivably could get done, and you're testing the waters. That's all it is. Being an active trader is how you make sure to not miss out on any opportunities. What's worse in fantasy than knowing that a guy was available because you see the trade come across the wire and you weren't the one involved in it because you weren't active enough in finding out where your league mates were in a given week? So that's just about being competitive in fantasy for me. And I don't have any regrets about it. Looks like my damn thing is screwing me up here. Nope, we're going to get back on board. All right, let's sort. Jordan Addison is the next player that we're going to look at wide receiver as we run through some of these trades that have gone down in Yahoo leagues. Addison for Olave is classic. I think they're in the same tier at this point, and I might prefer Addison just because of the health factor right now. Addison and Cousins stack for Pacheco. I don't know what kind of league that would be that happened in, but definitely the Addison Cousins side. A lot of single trades here with Addison, which I love because we can get a great deal of idea for the value that he has. Addison and Gibbs for Olave. Definitely prefer the Addison side if you're also having to give up Gibbs, who, again, isn't the main guy in Detroit, but he is somewhat relevant and a guy that I would like to stash. Addison for Ramondre. I prefer Addison, even though Ramondre is technically a buy low right now. Addison for Pierce. Addison side. Addison for Dell. Addison. Addison for Moss. Addison. And my gosh, these trades are getting done. That's why I had in the RB episode, trade Zach Moss, because you can get something for him. Addison and Thielen for Devonta. What in the world? That's crazy. Addison. Sometimes people just get so hell-bent on needing an RB that they just assume that, they don't respect. Maybe this isn't a PPR league. I'm going to assume that's got to be standard because no way you're giving up Addison and Thielen for Devonta if that's PPR. Yeah, I'm taking Addison's side there. Addison or Ford, give me Addison. Addison or Rachaad White, give me Addison. Addison or injured James Conner, give me Addison. Everybody who picked up Addison in these deals is doing a fantastic job. Flowers and Dell for Addison is a pretty fair trade. You get a rookie for a rookie and then another rookie thrown in. I would take probably the Addison side unless I'm in a deep league and I just needed the depth of like having a Flowers and a Dell. I could see that being favorable to both sides. Addison getting dealt directly for Justin Jefferson. I prefer Addison to Jefferson. Absolutely. If you're a Jefferson owner and you're 1-4 or 0-5 or 2-3 and you just don't think you can weather the storm, I would trade Jefferson for Addison. It doesn't feel good. It is bold. If you're 4-1 or 5-0, probably don't do it because maybe Jefferson comes back and everything's great. But I think Addison's going to be a smash while he's out. So that's interesting. Addison and Montgomery for Kelsey is a fascinating trade. Ignore Keontae Ingram. He's irrelevant. I take the Addison and Montgomery side. Right now, there are players in fantasy football. Listen close. There are players who their name, you don't feel like they're a superstar, but their performance is telling you otherwise. Adam Thielen is an example of that at the wide receiver position. And David Montgomery is an example at the running back position. He's just going to continue to get the volume. Dan Campbell continues to sing his praises, says you got to have a workhorse that can bang 20 carries, 25, 30 carries in a game. They believe Monty can do that. He's showing that he can do that, and they're willing to let him do that. So his name may be David Montgomery. You need to pretend that his name is Jonathan Taylor this year because that is the way he's going to be used in fantasy. Would I rather have Monty or Taylor? Tough. I would probably lean to the upside of Taylor, but that might be wrong, right? Sometimes we have to adjust our expectations. Monty was a 5-6 round pick. He wouldn't be today. He would be in that round 3 or better range, and Jahmyr Gibbs would be around 6 or 7 or 8 because the usage is undeniable. And until the Lions start losing games, they're not going to change things. So sometimes you just have to kind of decide what you think about a player for sure, but be willing to adjust. Hollywood Brown is another good example of a guy who he's not a superstar, but for fantasy, maybe we just need to treat him as being a consistent force And those kinds of guys that are going to get you 15 a week no matter what are so valuable. So pretend he's got a different name. Pretend he wears a different uniform. Sometimes we have to make those deals. So Addison in Montgomery for Kelsey, let's say I drafted Sam Laporta and I don't feel like I need Travis Kelsey. Let's say I've got Cole Kmet, who's come onto the scene, and I picked him off of waivers. And Travis Kelsey's been, good more of late, but not as efficient. And maybe Father Time is slowly catching up. He's been dealing with some injuries. That's not a crazy thing to do, to say I'm going to get two guys who they can smash. And if I'm good at tight end, I don't necessarily mind that trade. That's an interesting one, though. Let's go straight from Addison to Jefferson then and see how many deals are actually getting done for JJ. We know he's on IR. What does that end up meaning for his value? And if some of these are dynasty, then we're not really going to know that. But Amon-Ra and Bijan for Jefferson, if that's redraft, Amon-Ra and Bijan all day, every day. I would trade either one of them for Jefferson. Or I should say, I would trade Jefferson to get Amon-Ra straight up. I would trade Jefferson to get Bijan straight up. Because, again, he's missing 4 weeks, and I bet it's more like 6. And it could be the season. So if you are a below 500 team, you've got to be considering these possibilities. JJ and Ramondre for, this is disgusting. No, not for McLaurin and Rashad White. No, thank you. I'll take the JJ side. JJ for Rashad White. Disgusting. JJ and Rashad for CeeDee Lamb. Yeah, I would trade Jefferson for CeeDee Lamb. I would trade Jefferson for Deebo Samuel and Mostert. I would do that. Like, you might be able to get a running back that people are down on because Mostert's old or whatever. He's still going to be a very good producer for fantasy. And a wide receiver that's currently healthy and has upside to be a wide receiver 1 on a given week. You can get those guys. Now, for the Jefferson guy, maybe I'm 5-0 and I go, Mostert I drafted in the 9th round or whatever. Deebo is my wide receiver 3. I can afford to wait on Justin Jefferson and take that shot. Okay, I get it for you in that case. But otherwise, I would be generally looking to trade away Jefferson in a lot of these deals. Jefferson for DJ Moore and Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, man. I want to make sure that these are actually on the screen. If I've been messing that up, I apologize. Jefferson for DJ Moore and Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, I'm taking the DJ Moore and Taylor side, 100%. Jefferson for Chase, taking the Chase side, 100%. You got to remember, guys, he's out for at least 4 weeks. That's guaranteed. That's not like an opinion. That's legal. In the NFL, they can't bring him back sooner, and he may not come back thereafter. Jefferson and Ford for an injured Richardson and a Puka. I would trade Jefferson for Puka straight up in redraft. Yes, I would. Would I do for Raheem Mostert and Kirk? No, because I think you can do better. Like, listen, if you've got Jefferson, you go to, and you're 2 and 3, let's say. You're in 8th place in a 12-man league. You go to teams 1 through 7 and ask for their wide receiver 1 for Jefferson. If they all say no, then you ask for their wide receiver 2 and a bench running back. Like, if you need to get depth from your roster, it can be done because of Justin Jefferson's name. And he's out for 4 weeks. I'm banking on it being longer than that. If I knew it was only going to be 4 weeks and that it wasn't a case where the Vikings were bad and so you're worried about whether he wants to come back at all, then it's probably a different situation. But given what the situation is, I think I am on the side of trading away Jefferson, but it's not like you have to desperately, especially if you're above 500. You don't have to do that if you're having a good season. I'm mostly talking to the people. I want to clarify. I'm talking to the people that are struggling and would need to do a deal like that. Okay, Marquise Brown, I said, is maybe undervalued, but let's see what kind of deals are being made for him. Brown and Zach Moss for Olave. Good job. That's a 2-for-1 where you're getting the best player if you're getting Olave. Great work. Marquise Brown or Dameon Pierce, that's a little bit lower. I'm taking Marquise Brown in that trade. Definitely. A little bit higher, we're looking at Marquise Brown and Madison for Rashad White and Zay Flowers. I think I prefer, I prefer the upside of Flowers, but Marquise Brown's been outproducing him. And at running back, Madison or Rashad White, they both kind of stink, but I probably lean Madison slightly. So that one's pretty reasonable. We're definitely getting a glimpse at some of the reasonable trades that could be made out there. So we like seeing that. Anything else notable here? Marquise Brown and Kamara for Lamb, Moss, and Robinson. So this is a tactic that I like to do sometimes where I say, hey, I'm giving you Brown and Kamara, 2 good players, and I'm going to take a player that's probably better than both of them, like CeeDee Lamb, and then just ask for guys who are lesser. So they feel like, I'm getting 2 really good players for like 1 great player and 2 whatevers. I would still rather have the great player most of the time. It's like a 2-for-1 by any other name. whatever I do with Zach Moss and Brian Robinson doesn't really matter. I've got CeeDee Lamb. So I prefer the Lamb side on this one because I like him over Hollywood. And I think as much as Kamara is the best running back in the deal, I've got enough ammo there with Zach Moss and Brian Robinson to flip those guys for a running back that I would actually prefer to use. Whereas Hollywood in Mixon for Barkley is actually a really solid trade. I prefer the Barkley side on that. And I think Barkley is a guy you could trade for because of the injury and people are fed up with him. Hollywood for Ramondre. I'll take Ramondre in that deal. Hollywood for Najee. I'll take Hollywood Brown in that deal. Not as high on Najee. So interesting to see kind of the split there. Let's run through the last couple of these guys really quickly because I know this video has gone pretty long. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it, but I do want to try to get you the most complete info that I can. But make sure you subscribe and drop your comments below if you want to know more. Rashee Rice, just real quick. Rice or Reed, I'd take Rice over Jaden Reed. Rashee Rice or Zach Moss. I think I'd take Rashee Rice, especially if I needed wide receiver. Rashee Rice or Dameon Pierce. Yeah, I like kind of trading a mid running back for Rashee Rice if that's my third running back. Like that's the kind of move I'll make. However, if I can trade up from Rice to Debo and it only costs me DeAndre Swift, maybe he's my third running back. Yeah, I want to get Debo because I think he's a more elite player. So that's a move that I definitely like to see. Let's take a look at CeeDee Lamb. We want to go Lamb, Olave, and Smith, and then we'll be done. CeeDee Lamb with Ramondre and Garrett Wilson for Bijan. Okay, that's kind of, as long as the guy getting Bijan has great depth already, that's probably fine because he's getting the best player. But the other side got value as well, especially if they needed depth. Waddle and Madison for Lamb. I think Waddle and Lamb are in a similar tier, but I'm not high on Madison. So if you feel like, no, Lamb's better than Waddle, then you make that trade. I don't have an issue with that. We already said the Lamb side when you're getting Justin Jefferson there. Lamb for two mid running backs. Yeah, I'm taking Lamb over Madison and Brian Robinson there. Let's see, CeeDee and Kyle Pitts for Amon-Ra and Antonio Gibson. Pitts is someone that I'm always fine trading away, and this would be a week to do it. I'm not going to do a tight end video because there's not enough of them to pay attention to, but Pitts had a great week, and we just don't think in Atlanta that he can do that every week, so we're fine with capitalizing on the name value of Pitts because he has still got an attractive name. People know him from Draft Capital, and Dynasty people love him, but he's not going to be that guy for redraft, we don't think. So if we can go from, an inconsistent Lamb to Amon-Ra, I guess you could do that, but Amon-Ra and Lamb to me are still in the same category, so that one's a little bit strange. It's all down to preference. Lamb for Mixon. Yeah, give me Lamb. Lamb for Devonta Adams. Yeah, they're both wide receiver ones. Take your pick. I think it's like, hey, I'm going to buy low. No, I'm going to buy low. And they just do it, trade with each other. That's a weird one to me. You're always trying to go 2 for 1 to upgrade. I don't want to trade my wide receiver 1 for somebody else's wide receiver 1 necessarily. Lamb and Brees for Cooper Kupp. I think that's a rare example where maybe you do trade up because Kupp is going to be top 5 when healthy. Lamb's more like top 10, top 12. But Brees Hall, I also think is back. So unless I'm just loaded at RB, I don't really want to give up Brees right now. Thinking back to all the times I've traded Brees already this year, I kind of probably should have waited. CeeDee Lamb and Jacobs for McCaffrey. Yes, you always trade for McCaffrey. Almost always. CeeDee Lamb and Ingram for Kelsey. If you're loaded at wide receiver, I could see you doing that with Lamb, but otherwise, probably just want to have CeeDee Lamb. Okay, we'll go Olave and then Devonta Smith. 50-minute video. Kind of crazy, but it is what it is. Olave and Addison we've seen already. And that's just dealer's choice. It really is. Addison Gibbs side over the Olave side, as we said. Olave for Puka. We've seen a lot of these before. I'm realizing we're kind of talking about the same players a little bit. Olave and Taylor for Adams. Yeah, I'm going Olave and Taylor. But you guys, I think, know where I am on Olave mostly. So if you have any more questions about him, drop them below. But that's kind of where I am. Let's finish up with Smith here. I'm giving up T. Higgins and Elijah Moore to get Smith. Absolutely. T. Higgins, to me, is a guy that struggled. Didn't even play this week. He's not a buy low for me because I'm a little worried about his injury and just he could get traded and he's just been inefficient. He's not like, avoid at all costs, but I'd rather have Smith. Smith or Mixon. That's right here. That's a Smith. Smith and Kelsey for Adams and Sanders. Yeah, give me Smith and Kelsey. I'd rather have Adams than Smith, but Kelsey over Sanders is like a huge difference. Smith and Kyron for Devonta. That's a good trade for Devonta. But if you needed the depth, I could see Kyron Smith panning out. So it's a fair trade. And like the thing of it is, I'm always talking about making 2-for-1s. It only works if you're the guy that doesn't have injuries on your team, that does have depth. You have bench guys that you don't need. You have bye week guys that's just like your lineup is still solid. You can afford to do those 2-for-1s. And when you can, I'm always trying to get the best player available. Smith, Kamara, Higgins for Tyreek Hill and Najee. Najee stinks, but you have Tyreek Hill. So same example, as long as I'm good without Kamara, I've upgraded to the wide receiver 1 or 2, and I've taken a guy who's like top 15 wide receiver and, should be top 15, but hasn't been in Higgins. And I'm turning that into, I realize some of this is off the screen. I'll have to get better at that. But yeah, I'm thinking this trade right here, man, I like the Tyreek Hill side. As long as my depth is good enough to withstand giving up 3-for-1, essentially. Because Najee, I need to not be starting Najee if I'm trading for him. Let's see here. Smith and Waller for Dobbs and Laporta. I prefer Laporta to Waller, but it's not like a huge gap. Yeah, give me Smith over Dobbs. Dobbs might be irrelevant now with Watson returned. Smith and Henry for Pollard. I think I prefer the Smith and Henry side on that one, even though I like Tony Pollard. I just think you're trading like 3 second-round guys who have kind of performed like third-round guys, and one of the sides is getting 2, and the other one's just getting 1. That's where I am on that trade. Anything else crazy standing out here? Devonta Smith for Najee and Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I think give me Smith. Najee's a great name to be able to throw in, and people think they're getting value when they're really not. Smith and Dubs for Olave. I think I might be Smith over Olave, but it's close. I was Olave over Smith to begin the season, though, so I could easily see going back to that level. Okay, that's going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. I appreciate you guys so much. This has been Week 6, wide receiver trade for targets. Drop your comments below if I didn't cover the name that you wanted me to talk about, but we will continue to have a lot of trade strategy videos here on the channel, so subscribe and enjoy as we continue to dominate fantasy football season. Thank you guys so much for being with me, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.